My goal today is to offer some information in the concept of survival. And this concept is from the cellular level to the organ level to the individual level, and some of the hidden costs that we are not aware of, not told about in books. So ultimately, sometimes we have to figure them out on our own. Uh, Having developed my own product called Survival Operating System, I've come to the conclusion that the body runs off an operating system very similar to a computer. It's very binary. Needs are met, things happen. If needs aren't met, things happen. So the receptors dictate a lot of this information. And I've come to the conclusion a lot of people are stuck in survival mode and they actually don't know it. So I'll do my best today to offer some information, small details of areas that maybe we all are overlooking or overlooked that are hidden costs that get in our way for our own personal health, wellness, happiness. And these are directly related to a business or anything else because they're principles. So the goal, and I'm going to be bringing it from the body's point of view, more so than my own point of view. So first of all, I'd like to take the opportunity to make to get some definitions going so that we're all on the same page. So we're working with similar linguistics. We all use certain words, but sometimes we're not understanding the definition or the actual application of a word. So I'm going to choose, the first word I'm going to look at is we need to define what is health. So I've chosen to use the dictionary, and a lot of the times health is defined as something that it's not, rather than what it is. Probably because we haven't really seen it as a human race in a whole for quite some time. So we're defining things the best we can in a comparative way. So if we look at on here, not disease, Google dictionary definition, the origins, Germanic, related to the whole. The state of being free from illness or injury, a person's mental or physical condition. So let's look at the concept of balance then. If we took that to a business, a healthy business essentially doesn't have debt. Even if it's break-even cost, it's not in the red, it's not in debt. Being in debt, let's say in a business as an example, there's going to be an interest rate, so there's a hidden cost constantly that we're going to be continually paying, or a tax. I'm going to start applying that to the body for us to take a look at. So if it's balanced, how do we know balance? It's easy on a teeter-totter, a pound of bricks, a pound of feathers, a pound's a pound. But what is balance to our body and or a business? That the needs are met. That makes it a balance. What are the needs of the body that need to be met? Obviously, proper hydration. We all know about that one. Food, shelter, clothing. But one that's commonly overlooked is breathing and oxygen. And that one, it goes down to the cellular level. This gets down to the cellular processing into small little units called mitochondria in our body. And it's very important that the mitochondria in our body is using the correct resources so that there's an opportunity for the body to get a good cost benefit out of what it's using. So if we looked at what is survival, dictionary.com definition, the act or fact of surviving. That doesn't offer us much, especially under adverse or unusual circumstances. Okay, 2, a person or thing that survives or endures, especially in ancient custom, observance, belief, or of the like. Survival is a need position, is where I would like to bring this. This dependency of not having enough. It's very easy to see that a child, a baby, is actually a dependent. We need mom to feed, clothe, warm. The child can't get up and do this, the baby. So it's in a full-on dependency position of not having enough strength, not enough awareness, not enough of a lot of things in that moment. This isn't a forever moment, it's just in that moment. Survival in a need position, being dehydrated. Again, not enough water where it should be. You can put this to not enough minerals, not enough of anything in the body, not enough information. But what does the body need to survive? And this is often overlooked. I'm going to help you out because most people are unaware that there's 1,440 minutes in a day. Any numerologists out there? Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's a 9. End of a cycle. So if we looked at there's 1,440 minutes in a day and applied it to what are the body's basic needs of air, water, food. If we looked at air, the average brain can handle no oxygen for about 6 minutes. And after that, it's questionable how well it's going to function. Water, even if we chose 3 to 5 days, depending on the environment and the individual circumstance, it could be longer. So we'll put a range of 4,320 to 7,200 minutes. We looked at food, 20 to 30 days. None of this is very pleasant, by the way, but these are extremes for survival. So we're looking at 28,800 minutes to approximately 43,200 minutes. So I'm looking at what happens if our body doesn't get air, because we can go quite some time without, even if I took the minimum, we can go quite some time without water and food. But air is different. And it's quite often overlooked because air or oxygen currently is still free. And now in survival, the question is, does love exist? That's up for debate. Do soldiers kill each other out of love or fear? So at the moment, I'm going to leave survival with love questionable, because it really doesn't matter in this certain circumstance, because if we're not getting 4 to 6 minutes of air, nothing else is really going to matter in that moment if we're choking. We're not really thinking about maybe who we love or what we're going to love. We're trying to figure out how we're going to get air. If we're drowning, we're figuring out how we're going to get air. So the cell, more or less, the brain is figuring this part out. And it gets so confused if it doesn't get air based on its receptors, it'll actually try to take air underwater because it doesn't care what environment it is in, because there's a receptor inside that is a master controller more than our own belief system quite often, depending on the state of the person. But in survival, the body will typically be the master controller. You do not want the brain in control. So if we looked at breathing, now we need to look at how often the human body is going to be essentially doing this on average. A baby is 40 to 60 times a minute. That's 57,000 to 86,000 times a day. An adolescent, 18 to 30 times per minute. We're looking at 26,000 to 43,000 repetitions per day. An adult, 12 to 20, 17,000 to 28,000 times a day that these are happening, and regardless of the posture that you're in. You're sitting, you're breathing. You're lying down, you're breathing. There is a pattern being created. And there's going to be breathing. That pattern is going to be influenced 17,000 to 28,000 times a day for each of us. So there's an opportunity to correct that if the pattern's incorrect. Having an opportunity to look at how big the lungs are helps us as well. It's approximately the size equal to a doubles tennis court. I'm really hoping everybody understands what the size of a doubles tennis court is. And if not, feel free to take opportunity to look it up and get a nice mental image. The membrane, where the air comes in through our body, down through the trachea, into our lungs, through the bronchi, through the bronchial, down to our alveoli, it will cross at this level. And that level is called the alveoli capillary membrane, alveoli being the lung side, capillary being the blood side. And this membrane is extremely thin, 0.5 microns. Our hair, barring Brian and I's, but most everybody else, is about 75 microns. So this is where the concept of passive diffusion comes in. Excellent in theory, if the membrane stayed 0.5 microns thick. And there's ways to find out if it is passive diffusion or if it is not. So if you're trying to figure out what does this little alveoli capillary membrane as an image, think of your windows. You have a glass pane, most cases, and you have a screen. By definition, we could say the screen is a filter for bugs and bigger things. It's no different than the membrane is disallowing bigger things to cross it. So as the filter for the window is, as you open the window, the screen, depending on how well it's not congested, will depend on how much air you can actually get across from it. Obviously, if it's a clean screen and a wide open window, it's going to be very easy for air to pass from one section to another. You start closing the window, now you're putting the seal on. That filter actually doesn't have any value because the window has sealed it up. So that's no longer would be passive diffusion for the air to travel from my room to outside or outside to inside. Very similar to our human body. So looking at basic needs for breathing, we'll come back to that again, and then water. So this is we had around 4,000 minutes of this. So what is water? What are liquids? Are they the same? No, water's water. No one's going to really argue with that today. We're going to assume those are both whole numbers. Okay, if there's nothing else. That doesn't make sense all of a sudden now, does it? No. So if I looked at the concept really quickly of tap water, this is tap water. Because we added a whole bunch of solutions in just so we could get a 2. So a lot of people are drinking, let's say, tap water and failing to understand that there's neutralizers, chemicals to make it safe. So water isn't just water at that point. Because if water is water, why don't we just drink pool water, salt water? Because it's not very healthy for our body. Well, adding in these chemicals doesn't make it healthy for our body either. So having clean air and clean water are very crucial to the human body. Otherwise, it's really difficult to repair or clean something when you're putting something unclean in. Some simple ideas of what is water used for: blood, brain function, lungs and talking, eyes and tears, digestion, joint lubrication and mobility, heart function, sweat and body temperature, exercise, laughing, being happy. Pretty much everything, our body is going to require some water. And if we don't get enough water, we are now back in dependency and in survival. So if we looked at the purpose of diet, I think it's really important to look at the concept of food versus substance. Once again, calling something what it is instead of what it's not. In my definition, I would like to consider you guys to consider food would have vitamins, minerals, and amino acids, which are all necessity for the human body. If it's missing those things, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, then it's substance, even though it might look like food. A hamburger at McDonald's might look like food because someone told you, but if it's missing the components and the criteria for the label, it is not food. Now it's going to cost us more to neutralize, just like that tap water, what those chemicals are coming in that our body cannot use. That is a cost. It doesn't have to be a cost because we can choose not to eat it, but that also comes with defining what food is. Food also helps with our liver, kidney, and detoxification. It can be healing and rebuilding. Food. Substance, in most cases, is not going to be rebuilding. We're going to increase our inflammation and increase our dysfunction. So being clear with our definitions is very important when we're trying to be clear with ourselves. So these are the things that I do focus on with people, that let's actually define what we're talking about so we're all on the same page instead of using a meme that may just make us feel good. So we had the food resource versus substance. An organic apple versus a GMO apple. They're different. An apple's not an apple at that point. The GMO apple doesn't deserve the label of food, in my opinion, based on my own definition of it must have building materials that are healthy for the human body that meet its needs. Otherwise, some of our substance is going to put us into a deficit. So we're willingly putting ourselves in a deficit. If we looked at what are resources for a car, we can look at diesel, unleaded, leaded, now we have electric. But if it's a diesel, are you aware that you cannot put unleaded in that? Let that sit because it won't work. So it's very important that we put the correct resource into the car. For any of us that have vehicles, we know this. If you put the wrong one in, there's a consequence, as there should be, because we were strictly told what proper resource to put in. A smartphone. I have an Android. If any of you have an Apple, your cord won't work with mine. We know this. We can't just change it because we want to. It won't read it. There's a consequence. Tablet, same thing. It's great when we have USB micros, but then we have Apple that has its own, so that they won't cross over. Computer, once again, there's specific ports that work and don't work. We know this. Power cords. If you've been to Europe, they have a different power cord structure than we do in North America. Yours won't work there if you take it, no matter how much you want it to. So your consequence would be you're without it. Our body gives us consequences too. If we eat something that's substance or do something that isn't quite good enough for our body. But if our body is also stuck in survival mode, there's hormones that mask this, and we don't get told, nor do we feel it. So then we don't actually get to feel the consequence. Our body typically will reward it because it'll have a blood sugar spike, an epinephrine spike, a cortisol spike, and it might even have a touch of a serotonin spike. Those are all feel-good things. But in this case, it's negative. They're being rewarded for something negative. But it's very difficult for us to know this if the body is dysfunctional. So hormones are very important, and they're dependent on oxygen, water, and our diet. If you don't have enough oxygen, I'll guarantee you're not going to think straight. If you don't have enough water, you're not going to think straight. If you don't have enough food, depending on if you're doing a cleanse, let's say we're just doing regular, most people will not do well. If they're eating substance, drinking 3 or 4 coffees and a couple of Red Bull, they're not going to be rational, and their body's going to have to experience some type of a hormonal spike and imbalance. There's going to be a tremendous cost to this. So I created a chart called the accumulation clearance breaking point. And what I'm offering to show here is if our breathing as a human being, if our breathing's off collectively, our diet's off, our water's off, this is now a non-linear equation. It's no longer linear. We may measure it in years, but every system in our body will be altered. Our respiratory system, vascular system, nervous system, skeletal system, lymphatic system, muscular, all those systems are going to continually be off because of simple needs not being met. And they can be. We just have to become aware of them. So if you see on my chart here, if I can get that, this word up in here is called perception. And perception is based on what we are aware of, what we can feel, and what we've chosen to assess. Most of the time, we all have a similar idea. We don't fix what's not broken. We don't look at it. But there's an assumption there that it's actually telling the truth. Because hormones can really, really confuse us. So on the bottom, we have a non-linear equation. It's in exponentials. Because if our breathing's off, the lungs are not functioning as properly. The 28,000 repetitions are not going equally to left and right side of the lobes. We're going to have dysfunction in the spine. We're going to have alterations in our posture. That's going to affect our gait. It's going to affect our digestion. And all while that is going on, we may not feel it because of hormones. So we're going to increase what we're doing, which is going to expedite the situation that we're in. The longer that an individual is doing this, the greater the accumulation continues to grow. Over here, I have function and reality because I'm talking about the cell, what's actually happening underneath the iceberg, which is 87.5% according to science, and only 12.5% we see on the top. But the iceberg does get created from below and expresses itself on the top. The line right here is showing something's happened. It could have been a concussion. Someone had a heart attack. Something's not working anymore. My point that I'm offering up here is usually when someone's in their deathbed, they look back and can see clearly the things that didn't work. And every single one of them shows us some of the things that don't work. And as you can see, it's gray in here because it gets easier to see the things that don't work. This is hidden. The black is hidden from hormones. Lots of people will go to the doctor feeling kind of okay, maybe just a little bit of a sleep issue, whatever, and they find out they've got cancer because these hormones numb it. So we don't feel it, especially cortisol. If you're unaware of cortisol, it will suppress your immune system. It's an anti-inflammatory, which helps us not feel. That is not a very good thing, to be in a feeling of not feeling all the time. There's situations where we should maybe not feel because it's too intense. So these hormones are there to protect us. But when they don't shut off the fight or flight hormones, that's where I suggest we have now moved to a state of survival. And there's layers of survival. And each one of them is because there's not enough information, not enough breathing, air, water, food, not enough blood supply to specific areas. If there's not enough blood supply or these things going to certain areas, and our body will be so far out of balance that we're going to have abundance going to other areas, which is away from our concept of healthy, because healthy was balance. So these are survival mechanisms. When the breathing has been compromised from the cellular level, the blood's compromised, our mechanics are compromised, our perception is compromised, our range of motion, freedom with our joints is compromised, all for a reason. These are inflammatory markers of inflammation increasing in our body to actually slow us down from what we're doing. It's there to protect us. But we choose as a collective to override it because we're used to resistance. And nothing necessarily wrong with resistance, but we have to know what we're resisting. In most cases, we're actually resisting our own health because our body's telling the truth. It's not working. So I'm offering here point A to B exercise. It's much easier for person A to go from this point to this point. There's nothing in the way. There's very minimal, if any, resistance. The only resistance is their own energy expenditure to get there. This side has a lot more resistance. It is the same distance from here to here as it is from here to here, but the difference is what's going on here, the details. So if two people go for a walk, that's a kilometer, but one person has a altered mechanics in their gait, they're on this side. Even though it was a kilometer, their body did not get to walk as simple as this person. There will be a cost for this. There's too much contact time. The joints aren't aligning properly. So the surface area for the joint isn't the same as it is for the person over here. These add up. Those are all unneeded biomechanics errors that continually will get perpetuated that will cost the human body wear and tear. Most people call that age. It's really just a breakdown from homeostasis and the balance that it's in, and how far did it go. The problem with this is this might be a mental walk because they need to clear their head at the cost of their human body. So we have to be careful on what our cost benefit ratios are. Walking's good, unless you have congested heart failure, pulmonary issues, high levels of cancer. So, oh, actually, maybe it's not always good. That's just a meme. It depends on the situation of the individual, because there are breathing exercises that won't affect your biomechanics. So you wouldn't have to actually hurt the body to go for a walk to get exercise. But if the person's trying to get out of where they are, then they're actually abusing the body in that regard so they can get a mental freedom. They will have to pay for this at some point because there would be oxygen deficits, hydration issues, diet issues. My goal is to offer, it doesn't have to be like that. We can fix it. Each person will have their own gravity. If you've ever laid on a table and got a massage, why is it that your shoulders stay up? It makes absolutely no logical sense. Thought we were going to relax. Why would the body want to fight gravity? Because it has its own gravity inside based on its breathing. Those 28,000 repetitions are patterning something in your body, regardless of the gravital position or postural position you are standing on Earth. That is very significant because if we lay down and our posture doesn't change, then it might put into question, does the brain and body know you're laying down? Because why didn't it relax? Because it's stuck in its own gravity on inside, still trying to focus if it's getting enough air, water, and resource. And all of this creates resistance in the body. If you ever seen ballet dancers, it's incredible. They can put their leg right to their head. Is it because they're strong? No. It's because they have freedom of range of motion and they have flexibility, which allows them to show off their strength. In the fields that I've worked in, expansion or flexibility has been almost dismissed. The way you overcome things is you constantly try to get stronger, which creates imbalance, creates compression on your joints, your nerves, the blood vessels, which creates more pressure to move blood and lymph all the time, not just sitting there, which will affect our hormones. Now we're back onto that same cycle I just talked about. If the lungs if your body has balanced breathing and cellular physiology, getting enough oxygen, these hormones actually shut off, which allows our body to decontract or get out of the state of shock or state of survival. Otherwise, it's stuck in that position until the needs are met. It rations. And it'll even ration down to its words and being short with people because that's an energy expenditure. To get a better visual of what I'm talking about with the lungs, because some people are unaware that it's not just two bags sitting in there. We have compartments, the front and the back. And if certain compartments are overused, so say the mid ones are overused, then we're having 28,000 repetitions going into this section. Well, what's going on here? Path of least resistance, the body's not going to bring it there. So we have all this section, which is going to tighten up all through the lungs, heart, pericardium, just above the diaphragm, shoulder blades, altering our posture. For a moment, if I could get everybody just to use your mouth, take a big breath in and just feel what your body does with all that air coming in. All right, after you've done that about once or twice, now just take a fairly big breath and squeeze all the air out. Watch how your posture changes. So the squeezing out is where the body's stuck in contraction, and then the postures will stay, your shoulders will stay forward, your abs will stay used. But that big breath in changes the posture. If the lungs are functional, up here's your shoulders, down here's your ribs. So up in here, you take that breath in, your shoulders sit in a better position. So does your head. Wow, actually, the blood can get into your head a lot easier too. It's not congested. It's not taking more time or space where it should be. Your shoulders are here, better range of motion. Your spine's here. All of a sudden, the spine can start moving because these areas are active and not overused, but used just enough as well. All while this is happening, the hormones are becoming more balanced. And the hormones that we're trying as a collective to drop are our survival or stress hormones because they drive up blood sugar. And blood sugars, when it's up, our body only uses a smaller portion of the lungs because the purpose at that point is to get the waste material out, not about building things up in that moment. So the function is different. It's the exact same function as corticosteroids. So in breathing, I've created my own survival operating system, breathing, which corrects the alveoli capillary membrane to allow the concept of passive diffusion, which is free energy. Doesn't cost us as soon as I take that breath in, because my pressure is greater on one side of the membrane, it crosses right over. If that membrane is free, if it's clear, if it's clean. There's still the capillary side that I have to make sure my diet's good, my thought process is good, my hydration is good. So now the capillary side and the alveoli side are clean. That 0.5 micron, I've already crossed over. I've already had an exchange in my lungs. But if the filter is more like a window, there's not really much crossing over. It's very difficult for there to be passive diffusion, which is free energy. Now there's actually even a cost just to breathing. And I'm suggesting that every human's been born like this for several hundred years. So if you put your hands on your chest and gently dig your fingers into the ribs in between the intercostals, and you take a big breath through your mouth, you're going to notice something. Just to get a good feel in there. The wider you spread your hands, the greater the information that you'll gather. Okay. Now do it through the nose. I'm going to have to do that one again. Right. Go back to the mouth. You'll notice that those are actually different systems. The nose feels it from the inside. Our mouth will use the striated muscles to help us breathe. One uses lungs, one uses striated muscles. Inspiratory muscles even from our neck to help us. Intercostal muscles, diaphragm. The unique part of our of the breathing mechanism is we have muscles that inhale only and exhale only. Only. So if our body's stuck in survival and it's exhaling more, as a reminder, try to squeeze that air out again because it's stuck in that pattern. That is contributing to a kyphotic or poor posture in our thoracic spine, bringing our shoulder forward, bringing our head forward. And it'll be stuck in this position when someone's going to lay down to go to sleep. There's a very high probability they're going to snore. because their posture is not relaxing. So they're going to have a head tilt chin lift CPR moment. So they can get enough air in. Yes, this conquers snoring and apnea with the breathing that I've developed. And then the hands-on is to shut down the hormones in the computer. Last piece I would like to share is the detox systems in our body. I break them down into physics, gas, liquid, matter. Because we are in a gas environment, we were created in liquid. So we are master physicists, all of us. This human body is a master physicist all the time. Very important that now that we're outside of mom, thank you for carrying me, but now I'm on my own. Once that umbilical cord's cut, it's important that my body takes care of itself now. If I can't breathe very well, my body won't do very well. And why does that matter? Because we are in a gas environment. We are not in the ocean. We're not in water anymore. So we need our gas exchange system to work the most efficient out of all of our systems. But the survival system uses more liquid, just like an economy. So our issue here is, how do we get our body out of survival? Is it needs more oxygen. So our detox system, gas, we're going to use lungs. And that lungs are going to remove carbon monoxide, dioxide, pathogens as well. It's also our lungs and our nose, primal defense for pathogens, just as our stomach is. That's our first line. But if our lungs as a collective is inefficient, then there's a good chance it's inefficient at picking up a pathogen, a bacteria, a foreign material, because it will not be functioning correctly, nor will the surface area be fully operational, and the brain won't be aware of it all. So it's very easy to hide in allergies and then event or intolerances and allergies. Carbon dioxide, monoxide, they're different sizes of molecules. Why does that matter? Because now we have to go back to the alveoli membrane again, because if it's too big to cross or too congested, then it doesn't get to go to the lungs to get excreted. So then our human body is brilliant. It brings sodium and adds it to carbon dioxide, making sodium bicarbonate. Sounds like a decent idea, but now the problem is our kidneys are going to have to do the work that the lungs should have done passively. And the kidneys still have other things to do: manage water, hormones, filter for foods, blood, dead cells, not just trying to get rid of this extra carbon dioxide coming from the cell for poor fuel being used that the lungs should have had. So we went from a gas to a liquid now. And then our colon will excrete matter. But that's just considering, remember, that's where most of our digestion's actually happening. The stomach's just a distribution center to break things down. We have a lot of filters in our body, and digestions are other places. All of these systems are dependent on the cell's usage and the availability of oxygen. When it's not getting oxygen, it will start to use glucose. And that matters because when the mitochondria uses it, we have 6 carbon left over. We need oxygen for that at this cellular level. So that will matter once again on how well that alveoli capillary membrane works to effortlessly bring in air and let it cross over, as well as it'll matter how irritated our cells' receptors are in the blood from having too much blood sugar and the acidity that goes with that. What do all these do? Jack up our hormones. Why does that matter? Because these hormones are releasing sugar. That matters. Because the sugar is going back to creating this waste product, 6 extra carbon. Fats don't do this. just so you know, because it's hydrogen already. So this is a state of quick fix sugar. Nothing wrong with that. Burns like a diesel though, has a lot of waste. Should be very temporary. But I'm suggesting that it's not temporary. Almost everybody's born there. They just don't know it. So if I asked once again, what's health? My simplest definition, cellular balance that allows hormonal balance. That doesn't guarantee balance in our life. We have decisions to make, but we will probably all make better decisions if our body is allowing us to feel our environment, sense it, and use proper linguistics so we can hear even and feel someone's linguistics or feel their energy. It's much easier to do when the body isn't running its own survival program, which is altering the receptors and your vibration and your diet needs, your perception needs, your linguistics, your ability to perceive a percentage of the environment called perception. You won't miss as many things. Because the blood focuses on the base of the brain when there's high blood sugar. And then people will act like it, like a zombie. Just eat, move, sleep. No sympathy, no empathy. Compassion is not part of this concept. It's what can I get? And the survival rule is if you can't protect it, it is not yours. So it creates internal competition, even if you don't know you're in one. So that competition comes within the body as well for resources. So that's survival. And we're breathing a lot every day. And that can be fixed, which will change your breathing, your mechanics, your walking mechanics, everything. When I fixed my breathing years ago, my body got extremely supple. And I could understand the statement where Buddha said he walked away from yoga because it was another addiction, because it was breathing that needed to be fixed. Because I'll tell you what, everything you do, you're breathing. So it always looks like it works, right? You run, your reps went up. Looks like it works. Guarantee I can tell you how to do it another way. Won't ruin your knees, your hips, your SI joint, your ankles, your blood vessels, your spine, even your head, until you're ready to properly do it on a physiological level. Why do people hit plateaus when they're running or doing things? Because there's only so much you can breathe. But when the person's running and their breathing's off, there's only so long that their mechanics can last that long to be dysfunctional. Because we're all adding dysfunction to get our dopamine fix. When you can feel like that all the time and not have to do something to be rewarded, we could have earned it. So fixing our breathing allows the diet to change and allows our perception to change.